Okay, so moving on to normal maps. Technically, normal maps is quite an advanced topic in the way they sort of technically work. The way the engine interprets them and uses them in the material is really quite clever and advanced. And I suggest you go online and research that if you want to know more. But I'm going to show you and teach you what they do in an artistic context. And then obviously we're going to see how you author them later on as well. So, I mean, essentially they define how light hits and bounces off a surface or material, and it can give the perception that the surface is bumpy or indented. And they're often used to provide more details to a surface or a material and make it look like there's a lot more sort of polygons and detail in the object than there actually really is. In fact, a lot of artists sort of sculpt models in ZBrush or 3D Coat, especially character modelers do it, and they can bake out a normal map from the high sculpted version of the character and put it onto a really low polygon version of the sculpt, but it retains the detail of the high version, and that way you get a lot more detail in your low poly model. So without further ado, let's just go into Unity and see it in action. Okay, so here we are back in Unity, back into our scene, and you can see we have our albedo, our metallic and smoothness maps applied. Just want a very quick mention on the smoothness again. When you have a metallic image in that slot and it has alpha smoothness, the slider, when it's at 1, means it's using the alpha at 100%. It doesn't act in the same way as if you didn't have the map in the slot. So just to be clear on that, it's slightly different. So you can't get that to go ultra glossy because the map defines what it is. It's just saying, when that's at 1, use the map at 100%. That's what it's doing. So just so you're clear and you don't get, because it caught me out a little bit when I first used it. I thought, why can't I get it ultra glossy? And it's because it acts slightly differently when you've got a map in that slot, so just beware of that. So onto our normal map, and you can see it's pretty flat, even though we've got our smoothness working, and we can see where our rustiness is going to be. Still pretty flat. So here's our normal value here, and here's our normal map. So if I grab that and drag it and just drop it into the normal slot, it instantly changes the look of it. And wow, what a difference it makes. You still get the shininess where you want the metal to be, and you still get the rust, but you get this extra detail, the light, the way the light hits it. You get shadows actually on a micro surface level, and even though these holes are flat, they're just flat pixel, it's a pixel width, they look like they've got thickness on them, and that's the normal map doing that. So now my surface looks a bit more substantial, looks real, and it's acting and performing exactly how I want it. And this is what normal maps give you. Gives you that bumpiness and denting. So if we quickly go back to our alpha cutoff here. What this does is, if I put it on 0, it will say, even though there's an alpha map in my albedo, I've turned it off just by dragging that down. So it's just rendering whatever's in those spaces. But what it lets me do is just refine it. See, the moment I put it on, it comes on instantly. But you can see the edge around. If I zoom in really close, you can see this horrible edge. So the further up I take this, it just peels it back and takes away any sort of noise on the edge until I'm happy that it's completely in the right place. There. See, now I've not got any sort of weird artifacts around the edges of that alpha map, which is very cool, very handy. And yeah, so I'm very happy about that, and it's looking cool. So there we go. That is our albedo, metallic and normal map all working together to produce this look we have here. These other textures, height map for example, you can, when we get to substance, we can use height maps, and what that does is give it kind of like a, if you want extra normal map, if you like, you can put a height map in it and give you a kind of sort of parallax effect, which is quite nice if you've got something like moss, for example, where you want it to sort of appear as though it's protruding up or sticking up off the surface. And height maps do that for you, and they're quite cool. I mean, they get overused in my opinion sometimes. You don't want to overdo it with the height map because they can look quite ridiculous. The occlusion map is ambient occlusion, basically, so you can bake in some ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is lighting, is basically where the light can't get to. So for example, underneath this box it would be dark, but what you'd see around this edge here is sort of a faint shadow of where the shadow that is under the box sort of bleeds out onto the surface, and it just gives the scene a much more realistic look. It makes everything feel like it's actually right there in that position and grounded. Bit like shadows do the same sort of effect, but ambient occlusion takes it, just pulls it one step further, and it's a really nice effect, and we'll use that in our maps later. I mean, there is another technique now which they call screen space ambient occlusion, and that's becoming more popular because what that does is it does it on the fly, it does it in real time, although it can be quite expensive from a processing point of view. So using a map, it's pretty cheap. The detail mask works alongside these secondary maps. So basically, if you wanted, let's for example say you had skin on a character and you wanted some extra detail, you wanted to show the sort of pores in the skin, you would do a smaller detailed albedo and you would sort of tile it across the surface of the skin of this current albedo. And you can have a normal map that does the same thing. And this detail mask you can use to mask areas of that skin where you want it and where you don't want it. So that's a pretty cool thing to use, and you can use it for other things too. So, but that's just one example. That's very cool. We may use one of those, I'm not entirely sure, but we shall see. A mission, that is basically when you want something that's self-illuminated. So, and we will be using that in our fire, for example. When our logs in our fire is burning, we just want the embers to glow, and that's what we can use a mission for. And a mission acts like a texture light, if you like, because it will emit light in the area of where the emission map is, and they can be really quite effective in that respect. So that's what a mission is. And obviously you can, you've got this tiling and offset business, but we'll get into all that later when we start using it. So there's your PBR material for Unity. Very, very cool. So that's it. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lecture, where I'm just going to finish off, give you some links to do a bit more research into how PBR works, and so I'll see you there.